All right, good evening. Welcome to another second episode of the Hall Hoops and Happenings, our new midweek show talking all things Seton Hall basketball, men's, women's, campus, Big East basketball, you name it. We'll talk about it. Maybe a little baseball in a few weeks for our men's team. But joining me today, we have a full panel. We have to my right my co-host Nick from Milburn.
Hey,
Nick,
guys.
how are you?
How you doing, Bobby? What's up, my guy?
We got Paul Justafan LaMonica.
How you doing,
back from Iceland? How's Iceland, Paul?
Cold. But I crossed the Northern Lights off the bucket list. So
any basketball going on in Iceland?
Not so much.
Below me, joining us for the first time, Ryan Scoop Woodhams. Ryan, how are you?
How are y'all doing? Glad to be here tonight.
Welcome, right. Ryan. Happy to have you. Welcome aboard.
We got Nick Morgan. Nick, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
It's like Brady Bunch. We got to practice the Brady Bunch thing where everybody looks up and around. And we got Chris Jones from SOU with us. And last but certainly not least, our co-host down there at the bottom, Chris Russo. Chris, how are you?
Robert, gentlemen, thank you. Fine, thanks. How are you?
All right. Well, Nick, take it over. I'm going to do our thing. Hold on.
What?
Another one more yet. Art Thomas joining us for the first time. Hello, Art. How are you?
Art, you're on. Art. He's not.
All right. Anyway, Nick, take over. I'll do some producing here, and we'll wait for our guest, Dan Dunne, to join us in a few moments.
Hey, guys. I hope everyone's doing good tonight. I think we're going to start it off and talk about the women's team and the game yesterday. I know our experts, Nick Morgan and Chris Jones from WSOU, were at the game. Guys, give me your thoughts. My son actually worked the game, and he said it was a pretty good game. But what do you think? What happened? What impact is it going to have on the rest of the season? Any NCAA implications? What do you guys think?
Yeah, so what I saw from last game was this is a team that has a lot of firepower all across the roster. But I think they're trying to find a way to incorporate all the firepower, and it's not going the way they wanted. Because Faith Massonis last night wasn't the Faith Massonis we've seen all night or all season long. Because, again, Jada Eads, what she did in that game, 19 points in the first half, she was lights out. There was no stopping her. But then once the second half started, Marquette started finding ways to slow her down. They started pressing her towards the arc, not really giving her the space to shoot from behind the three-point line. So the second half, Jada Eads wasn't the same. Faith Massonis all night long wasn't there. And then some of the other players, we saw Yaya Lopes. She had a big clutch three at one point to close the gap just a little bit. But also the big point was Savannah Catalan did not play. She was not there. We're not exactly sure what it was. I'm hearing that she might have came down with the flu. So maybe that was the case. But last night, they looked good. Just not the most consistent team that we've seen and are used to from all season.
Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the same stuff that Chris said to echo there. Faith Massonis missed 10 shots, a lot from down under. Marquette just is the bigger team. And on paper, statistically, they kind of match up with us height-wise, but they just use their height better. They use it to an advantage that we don't necessarily have. I mean, Romani Parker is our biggest player at 6'4". She's finally getting minutes. This was her third game back from injury. She had her season high in minutes yesterday with 15. Previously it was 6 and then 8. So she's finally kind of ramping back up a little bit. Maybe we'll see more out of her, but the height really got to Faith Massonis down below. They were using the height on Eads for a little bit as well because Jades was just throwing up, high threes, and she was making them from pretty much anywhere she was shooting from. Ended the night with 26 points, went 4 for 8 from distance, which was big. But Kaden Lawson last night continued to prove why she's a household name, was the second highest scorer for the Pirates with 10, the only other Pirate to score double digits last night following Jada Eads. So she's really coming along and coming together well. I think that's something that we're not talking about a whole lot. And we talked about last broadcast how Amari Wright is really stepping into that role, and we see her great as someone who's going to be assisting the team, and she's very selfless. But last night she also stepped up. She made 2 threes, had 8 points on the day as well. So it came down to the height yesterday and the pressure. Also, Marquette ranks best in Big East with the rebounds per game, and that showed. They overpowered us on both boards, offensively and defensively, and it really came back to hurt us a little bit there, especially towards the end.
We've said before that on how Faith goes, how this team goes, and Faith is the glue of the team. Did Marquette do any scheming to try to? You said she didn't have her best game. Do you think that was because of the defense with Marquette and without having Catalan there? What do you guys think?
Yeah, so I do think they had their mindset and what they wanted to do there, specifically with Jada, at least, only just because of what Jada's been doing all season long. They definitely had a mindset with her. But I don't think anyone really expected the whole Savannah thing. I mean, I remember when I was there at the game, she wasn't warming up, and everyone was kind of like, where is she? Like, no one really kind of had that idea that she was going to be there. So I think Marquette was even kind of confused to not see Savannah out there, at least. But outside of that, they definitely went in with the mindset of they need to slow down Jada, because when you slow down Jada, a player like her, how fast she is, how agile she is, how athletic she is, she's one of the players that can really change a game no matter what the score is. So Marquette definitely had that mindset going into the game.
Thank you. Chris Russo, you had some thoughts?
Yeah, Tom actually just commented. Yeah, I actually covered the game for Tom just commented for JD Walker for Stream Punk last night. I was beat writing the game. And so I actually do know, I'm not going to say because I don't believe the team has made it public. I do know why Catalan sat. I will just say the most important thing is I think she can be expected back very soon, I would think by the next game. But yeah, obviously the fact that she sat out was huge. She had tied a Big East Conference record the previous game with 11 steals. I got to cover that game as well. She was phenomenal. And look, in a 7-point game, you'd like to think if you're a Seton Hall fan, she probably would have been enough to win it. But then again, how often does Jada Eads really go off for 26? You can play revisionist history, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I think Nick really said it best where it's very crucial. The boards were the killer in this game. I believe it was the rebounds were 37-24 favoring Marquette for the evening. And it's funny because I think it was Chris that brought it up. It was it might have been Nick actually, but Romani Parker, not only 6'4", not only is she the tallest player for Seton Hall, she's the tallest. She would have been the tallest player on the floor last night for either team. And so I would have liked to have seen if there would have been more of her from Coach Bozzell. It was very interesting. He did not really run a long bench last night. But I think the big killer was, besides the 10-0 run at the end of the third quarter, late in the third quarter for Marquette, which I think is ultimately the difference in that game, a 7-point game that was tied at halftime. I think the big killer was the Pirates had fought back from, I think, 11 down to about 5 down with about a minute and a half left. And then Caden Lawson, who, to be fair, a lot of those 10 points, she was the only other player besides Eads in double figures. She had 10 points, but she was in serious foul trouble. A lot of those points came late as well. She had a really good look from three, down by 5, and it was just off the mark. And that might have been the biggest turning point within the last couple of minutes or so. I think that was the killer, and then Marquette just buried their free throws from there. There was also a point I will say, I think there was a point with under 4.5 minutes left where the Pirates went 0 for 4 from the line in a span of about 16 seconds, and that was a real killer for them, and that included 2 shots from Jada Eads. However, all of that aside, this is still a Pirate team that is on pace for the most wins it's had since they last reached the NCAA tournament in 2016, most regular season wins since they made the NCAA tournament in 2016. And the only team with a better record than them that they still have is UConn. Not to say I expect them to win that game, but you win the games you're supposed to win, you should make the NCAA tournament.
I have my tickets for the UConn game, and I am looking forward to it. And I see that Nicole Gizzi has joined us. Nicole, what's up?
Hello,
Welcome,
everyone.
our executive producer and the woman responsible for all this, Nicole Gizzi. What's going on?
I kept my promise to Chris Jones.
And not me, Chris Jones, but not Nick?
And listen, all I know is that Gister came on the screen, and the viewers jumped up by 15 people, and Gister joined.
The whole Gizzi family's on right now. Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Gizzi. To Chris Russo, you had said that you couldn't tell us why, and I totally understand that. But let me ask you this. Do you expect her to be 100% in our next game?
I honestly have to be reminded when the next game is.
It's upcoming
Sunday.
Wednesday.
Sunday? Today's Thursday?
Sunday. My apologies. Sunday.
Sunday? I I don't know about 100. She's going to be. I would think she'd be well above 50.
Okay.
Guys, before we get Mr. Dunn on, I'm still waiting for him to join us in the green room. We have some new faces out there. Let's say, Art Thomas, what say you down there in the bottom? Welcome to the family.
Welcome.
Thanks. Glad to be a part of it. I'm finally getting in here. But yeah, looking forward to it. Maybe I'll add something here.
And also, before we mentioned Ryan Scoop Woodhams, we actually let some Valenti guys in here. I'm going to have to talk to his hurt about that one. But Ryan, give us some insight. You're on mute. You're on mute.
My apologies. Thank you. No, I appreciate being on here tonight. Y'all know that I made some comments last weekend about what I saw in that game or what I didn't see in that game. Obviously, I mean, we all know what's going on offensively and the fact that it's been kind of offensive to the eyes watching this team at times. And the fact that, I talked about last week the issues that they were having with the boards, the fact that they are, they're the only team in the Big East with a negative differential right now, scoring wise. It's kind of, the question is, the defense has been fine, but the question is, who's going to be that guy that's going to break through for us offensively, that's going to stop this run that they've been on, where they're now only have one win in almost 20 games in the Big East. So, that's the difficult thing watching them, is that there's not really one guy where you're like, okay, once this guy gets going, it's gonna all break through, because it has appeared, at least to this point, that some of the guys that they have now, even the guys who are scoring at the top of the stats, are not able to sort of pick up the other guys behind them.
Yeah, so we'll segue into the men's team real quick here. This is a very, I don't remember the last time being a fan and media or whatnot that the team has been this low. What's the last time we were this bad, guys? Help me out here.
PJ's first year, we had 6 wins, and we have 6 wins now. And like I said before, I honestly don't see number 7. Sad to say.
And I'm actually considering, maybe skipping the Big East men's tournament and going over to see the women play, because I think that's going to be a better product right now, unfortunately for the team or whatnot. But unless our little project with Dan Dunn comes to fruition, I'm waiting for Dan to come on. All right, what else do we have? Nick, take it over.
Hey guys, I'm going to go over to the Big East on Thursday. That's like a holiday for me. So I don't even know if we'll be playing. I hope we are, but I'm going over for the day session. Anyone wants to join me, please feel free. But we have Paul here, and Paul has been quiet. Paul, what do you think about the women's or men's team? Any thoughts?
Well, I wasn't able to see the women's game. Again, I think the women are having a tremendous season. There's a big gap, obviously, between a good season where they are in the top of the women's game in the NCAA. And hopefully when they play UConn at home, they'll be able to close the gap, right? When they went up to Stores, it wasn't a pretty sight. As far as the men's team are concerned, my first thought, and I put together a little bit of a scouting report on UConn, but my first thought is I'm hoping someone will be at the Rock with a big sign that says Brian Caver was better. And for those of you who don't remember the reference, Brian Caver was the point guard before Danny Hurley took over the point guard.
Brian Caver, not to interrupt you, Brian Caver was better, but PJ did not use them right. And PJ actually, like Darryl, throwing names out there, Darryl Chris better than Brian Caver. So yeah.
Well, that would be my sign, because Crazy Danny has been having a classic season. Against Butler, I believe he said to a referee, and I quote, "Don't turn your back on me. I'm the best effing coach in the sport." Now, if I were refereeing at that point, I would say, let's see how good a coach you are from the locker room, giving him 2 technicals and send him on his way. But, I think that the UConn is going to be a very tough matchup. They have 3 very good players. They have, they play very, very good offense. They take care of the basketball. They have a very high assist to turnover ratio. And if I just jump into it quick, and I'll just jump into it quick. Solo Ball and Liam McNeely are both tremendous talents. One's a sophomore, the other one's a freshman. I think Alex Caravan is the best player on their team. He does just about everything, and he, was a national champion last year. Their point guard is Hassan Daria, and he is also very good. And at center, they do get some production from Taris Reed and Sansom Johnson. Taris Reed's averaging 7 boards a game. So they're a very, very good basketball team. They have had – it's hard to say that a team that's 17-7 has had a disappointing season, but the expectations were so high for this team. I think a third national – we can ask Pat Mahomes how hard it is to three-peat. But I think that Seton Hall will have a tough time coming up with answers to the 3 stars on UConn. So I think it's going to be a tough game for us. I'd love to see us be – nothing's more fun to watch Danny Hurley's head explode. But I don't see – I think it's going to be a very, very tough afternoon on Saturday.
I know.
Art, do you have any thoughts? Art down there? Yeah, Art, you go.
Yeah, I do. I think it's going to be another game where the inside game is going to hurt us a lot, right? It's not new this year at all. But UConn knows how to pound it inside. And Danny knows what our weaknesses are, right? So it's funny. I'm building on Paul's thought there. I always wonder how much the coaches riding refs really help, right? I mean, it's funny. You see certain coaches have that charisma or whatever, or they can affect that there. But I just wonder if there's a negative effect as well. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that. I'm always watching. I sit behind the visitors coaches. We're about visiting coaches. We're about eight rows back. So I'm always watching really closely. And I don't know. I'm skeptical on whether that really makes a difference or whether it has a negative effect.
I mean, I think it depends on the ref. The Big East has some really good senior officials like Brian O'Connor, Pat Driscoll, people like that. And you're not going to change them. And when you get on a ref, it's not for the call that was just made. It's for the next call. So there is a lot of evening out with call refs. They won't admit that. And if you ever watch a game, I sit next to a high school official, senior high school official. And if you look up at the scoreboard and if it's like 8-2, he says, just watch. In a few minutes, it'll be 8-6 or 8-7. And that always happens.
I think Chris had a point. Chris in the bottom.
Yeah, I will say I think from looking at it firsthand, I never consider myself a homer, but I honestly thought I saw that work positively for Jay Wright. I thought that worked pretty well for a long time, and that is not to take away from Villanova being a very good basketball program, having a lot of talent, having a well-coached team. But I thought, especially against Seton Hall, you saw a lot of, I wouldn't even say charm, I'd say intimidation from Jay Wright toward the officials, and I think it worked to his benefit. Now,
right, I think go on.
Yeah, obviously, Kyle Neptune is not that now. It doesn't mean Kyle Neptune's as good a coach anyway, but yeah, Villanova got the benefit of some calls.
I think McDermott, by the way, gets that now as well. I think McDermott is one of the best at working the refs. And obviously, they're always averaging the fewest fouls in the league anyway. But it just feels like he has an effect there.
I think the thing with Jay, and I'll never forget this game, and I think Chris Russo and I talked about this on Hall Line. I saw one game when Jay was getting on the officials, and they gave him a warning. Willard was getting on the officials the same way, and they gave him a technical. It's just I think that, and I think Paul's favorite coach Gino. I think Gino has the same effect on officials. Not that they're intimidated by him, but they do treat them a little bit differently. Coach Pizzella says that about Gino all the time.
But I do think that for somebody like Danny Hurley, who is so over the top, I've seen officials go into games already set not to be intimidated. And so they're already antagonistic toward Hurley. You saw this a lot with Bobby Knight and a couple of the other guys like that back in the day, where the officials are so determined to not be intimidated by the intimidating coach that they're already calling they already know what they're going to call on a charge block based on what color jersey the guy has before the play happens, because they're going to show the coach that they're not afraid. So I think that there comes a point at which it does become a disadvantage And I just wonder if Coach Hurley at UConn has actually hit that point yet, or if it's still working to his advantage. We'll have to see how that goes the rest of the season.
By the way, Captain Tom with a great comment. That was a great video, too. Danny to the Creighton fans, bye-bye, 2 rings, bye-bye. That was classic. And by the way, as Seton Hall fans, alum, whatnot, we're going to need our guy, Danny Hurley, to knock off St. John's maybe twice, Big East tournament and NCAAs. So we got to keep UConn afloat because I don't want to see St. John's anywhere near the Elite Eight or even Sweet 16. So we got to hopefully Danny can knock them off at least once this season.
Guys, keeping on the officials topic real quick. I know all you guys are followers of the game. Who do you think are some of the better Big East officials and who aren't?
James Breeding.
Aren't, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just know Seton Hall fans are going to make me say that, and I know that's that was going to be spat out at some point. I just figured I might as well get it out of the way.
Yeah, James Breeding's about as bad as they get. I still remember the Marquette game in the Big East tournament semis a few years back, and I think Miles Powell actually thought he got thrown out of the game, and then someone had to run and pull him back. Right, Chris remembers. Yeah,
I did Hall line for that game. That was one of the most remarkable. That was, and who was it? It was Theo John, I think, was on the other end, and I remember actually talking to him the Big East Media Day the next year, and he was very calm, cool, and collected about it, and was very nice about it. But that was it's no real surprise that I think it was a surprise that you really had 2 teams from. It wasn't like just the Northeast. It wasn't like a Seton Hall Nova or a Seton Hall St. John's or something like that, or UConn Nova, whatever, or the Midwest region, like the new part of the Big East. But yeah, that was a wild affair, and it's not surprising really that James Breeding was part of the confusion of all of that. And yeah, I think we did think Miles Powell was getting thrown out, and then he had to come back out of the locker room. That's one of the more remarkable things I've ever seen on a court.
Yet James Breeding gets Elite Eights and Finals Fours. I don't know how that happens, but yeah, we have a message down there. Yes, Brian O'Connell, I think, is the best official in the Big East. Yeah, I think that also. But he's very professional, very fair.
Thanks, Matt, for the comment.
Thank you, Matt.
And without further ado, our esteemed special guest, former Seton Hall player and member of the original teams of Seton Hall who played in the Big East. Let's welcome our special guest, Dan Dunn. Dan, how are you this evening?
Very well, thank you. I'm up here in Rochester, New York. It's kind of cold, but hearing all the good pirate stuff keep me warm with my memories of playing as a pirate.
All right, Dan, you're amongst a bunch of fellow alum fans and whatnot for the Seton Hall Pirates. Again, welcome to the Hall Hoops and Happenings and our first special guest. So that's a little history in the making here.
Come on, I'm honored to be the first team on first Big East team at Seton Hall and the first guest of the show here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, you have the questions? Take it away.
Dan, Nick from Milburn. We graduated together. I stayed an extra semester. Do you remember? I'm sure you remember what was so unique about our graduation.
Oh, President Reagan. President Reagan came. He was late, and Pearl Bailey stole the show.
Right. Pearl Bailey was supposed to be, I guess, the guest, and then the last minute, President Reagan wanted to come. So they're not going to say no to President Reagan. So yeah. we had two guests, and then he was late, and Pearl was on stage singing, and the helicopter was flying in. Yeah. And it was probably the only graduation. We were probably the only class in the history of Seton Hall. The Secret Service wouldn't let us go up and get our diplomas. Yep. We had to get them a few weeks later.
Oh yeah. Remember it well, but I remember it was on the football field, which is the baseball field now, and Secret Service. There were snipers in the all over the buildings. People couldn't look out the windows. It was very tight security, and Reagan was late, and Pearl Bailey said, "All right, let's have a sing along," and we started singing "Hello, Dolly."
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, she stole the show. She stole the show.
Captain Tom up there says, Dan, it's colder in Buffalo. So Buffalo, Rochester, to me, it's cold. I'm in Sullivan County, so it's cold here. So you guys are way up north right now.
Yeah, Buffalo's always colder than Rochester. They always get more snow than we do.
Wait, Mr. Hurley, are you saying Rochester?
Yes.
I was born
Mr. Dunn. No, not Mr. Hurley. Mr. Dunn.
Oh, my apologies, Mr. Dunn. I apologize.
That's right. I've been called worse.
I apologize. I was only asking because that's where I'm from. I lived there for over 20 years.
In Rochester?
Yes.
Whereabouts?
Mendon and then Brighton.
Oh, you're an East Sider. I'm a West Sider. I'm in Greece.
Oh, okay. Yeah, close friends we got in Greece as well.
Very cool. Very cool.
Very cool. Very cool.
So, Coach Dunn, in your years at Seton Hall, there were the beginning of the Big East.
Mm-hmm.
You had people like Chuck Alexanis and John Pannone, some really physical big men.
Mm-hmm.
And were there any guys that you really enjoyed playing against? Any guys that you dreaded playing against?
I was block to block. If you took me out of the key, forget it. In the block, it was my game. Danny Chase from Syracuse, still playing against him. Andre Hawkins, Bill Winnington from St. John's. I love playing against them because we just stayed inside and basically beat the hell out of each other. It was like caveman basketball with the clubs and stuff. You know, you're beating the hell out of each other. But Otis Thorpe from Providence, he was Karl Malone before Karl Malone, and he was just huge. And I remember playing against him. And if you remember the Rocky movie and Rocky beating the heck out of the side of beef, that's what I felt like after playing against him. It was taking my jersey off was like bruises, and oh man, it hurt so much because he didn't run like this. He ran like this, and when he hit you, you were thumped. You could feel it. Chuck Alexanis was 6'11", 250. Threw me around like a rag doll. But you know what? We played tough. We were North Jersey, Long Island, New York City, tough, and we played hard, and we didn't let anybody get the better of us. If you remember the heavyweight boxers from the 70s, Foreman, Frazier, Ali, we were Ernie Shavers, Joe Bugner, Jerry Quarry. You know, we were contenders. We were good enough to be in a ring with them. We get our shots in, but ultimately, you know, they would get the decision or they get a TKO type of thing. But guys, I would not want to play against again. Roosevelt Bowie from Syracuse.
Mm-hmm.
The Bowie and Louie show, right? Bowie and Louie.
Their senior year was the first year of the Big East was my freshman year. We played them up in Manly. They were number 9 in the country.
That's right. Before the Carrier Dome. That's right.
Right. It was the last year of Manly Fieldhouse, and we never experienced anything like that. We thought Walsh stuff to playing. Manly was crazy because everybody was up stomping and clapping their hands, and it was just loud. And they were number 9 in the country, and they beat us like an egg, you know. And it was tough because Roosevelt Bowie just took me to school. He took me out to the woodshed. And
remember the point guard they had, Marty Head.
Marty Head. Yep.
Marty Head had a shaven head back then.
Yep. I think he had some kind of I don't know if he was bald by genetics. I don't know if he was sick or anything, but I know he had some kind of health issue, I believe. But he was tough. Eric Sandifer, Red Bruin. You know, every team in the Big East back then, they had 4, 5, 6 guys that could play. And we had
you also played against Patrick. And then you played against Keem Olajuwon. I mean, you can't play against anyone, you know, NBA legends. How did, you know, what do you think about that, those elite players?
Well, I like to think I got my behind kicked by the best in the world. Again, I was proud to be a Pirate. I never thought I could play at that high a level and hold my own. But playing against Patrick, that was it was tough. Playing against Akeem was different because he was big and agile. But I don't think he ever played against a 6'10" Puerto Rican before, so he didn't know what he had to do. He didn't know how to deal with me. But my claim to fame was when we beat Houston, I outscored Clyde Drexler and Akeem in that game.
Wow.
You know, so that's my claim to fame. And our beating Houston my junior year was our signature win for the first 4 years of the Big East. Then that was the first year they went to the Final Four at Phi Slamma Jamma. Well, we were lucky we got them early in the season, because if we would have gotten them in like January, February, no. We played them 10 more times. They'll beat us 11 times.
Danny, let me jump in on that, because that was your junior year.
Yes.
So you were recruited, by Hadi Mahan to come to Seton Hall.
Mhm.
And then when you got here, Billy was the coach, Bill Raftery.
Yeah.
And then I think before your junior year, maybe September, October, right before practice was supposed to start, Billy calls you guys into the locker room and says that he's taken a job with a bank, of all things.
Mhm.
And how did that, were you, of course you were devastated, but what were the feelings and how did that go?
Oh, I had Coach Raftery my freshman and sophomore year, and going to the junior year, he was actually there for the first 2 weeks of practice.
Okay.
So it was like November 8th, 9th, 10th, around there or something. We have practice, goes into the locker room. It comes in. We're like, what's going on? Bill, when Coach came in, something was up. We were joking around, kidding around after practice, getting ready to go over to bowling hall to get some great Mackey food that they had to serve back then. And it was basically, fellas, all good things must come to an end. And I have another opportunity that I'm going to take. I got to look out for my family. You guys will understand when you get older. I have to look out for my family, and I'm going to be taking a job with a bank. And we were like, okay, this is some kind of joke. Because Raph was always kidding around, joking, pulling our chains and stuff. This is some kind of joke. And we were all in shock. And he said, but Hadi's going to take over, so I know you're in good hands. And we were like, what you fill in a blank, just happened. And then Hadi just said, fellas, we're going to keep on working. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. And we're going to make the most of the season. So we kind of felt devastated, but we lost Batman, but we still have Robin. So Gotham City is still safe.
And you guys got off to a 9-3 start that year. Mm-hmm. And I think if I remember, one of the things Hadi did was, guys, we had a player by the name of Howard McNeil, who was kind of like a poor version of Magic Johnson. He was 6'8", but Billy always had him playing at the power forward. Hadi took him and moved him to the point guard position, and that freed up Danny Calandrillo to have his best year. And it also got Dan a little bit more involved in the inside, and that seemed to light a spark under that squad, right? Dan, what are your thoughts about that?
Oh yeah, we were 9-1. The first 10 games my junior year, we're 9-1. We lost to number 2 Kentucky at Kentucky, on with Dickie Hoard and Melvin Turpin, and they were a powerhouse. And I remember Hadi at halftime before the game. He's like, pre-game, like, fellas, I don't know how we're going to beat these guys. I got to be honest with you, I don't know how we're going to beat these guys. We were like, what the heck? Come on, Hadi. We thought he had a punchline. Seriously, fellas, I don't know how we're going to beat them, but we're just going to go out there and do the best we can. And the first half, it was home cooking with the refs and everything. As soon as the Cats got their spread, then the refs kind of backed off. And then we beat them in the second half, and Joby Hall was going nuts on his plays after the game because we beat them in the second half. But us going 9-1, we thought as a team we were going to be ranked. We said we were thinking even if we go 500 in the Big East, we're going to go to the NIT, because back then there were only 48 teams, I believe.
Right.
48 teams, and not 64. So we're going, all right, if we go 500 in the conference, maybe we'll make the NIT. So we go 9-1. 3 starters fell off, academically ineligible. And so it's like, oh, geez, so we just lost, 20 points, 12 rebounds, 4 assists, 60, So the bench, we had a good, solid bench. The bench players had to step up and be starting and log major minutes. So Hadi basically gave the keys to the team to Danny Calandrillo. Danny went to the phone booth, put on a Superman costume, and then he came out. Him and Mike Ingram basically carried us for the rest of the season.
Big East Player of the Year.
Big East Player of the Year. Only Big East Player of the Year from a last place team. Only Big East player in Big East history come from a last place team.
Now, Coach,
there were 3. Let me just jump in real quick. There were 3 games in a row, Danny, that Danny, he knows what I'm going to say. Yeah. That Danny hit buzzer beaters
Yeah.
And one was against Princeton and Pete Carrill, and Pete was going insane that game.
Yep.
Because I think they had you up 20 at the half. Is that right?
No, not Princeton.
Yeah, at the first half, Princeton had you up, and then Danny came back, and you guys beat him at the buzzer.
I don't think Princeton was up by 20 because Princeton
They were up in the first
They were
half.
probably up.
That up.
They played that slowdown game, but I
12 to 8.
know Danny hit a shot at the buzzer, and he hit the shot. I got a picture of it. Danny hit the shot over Craig Robinson. I believe it's Craig Robinson, who was Obama's son-in-law.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And then very next game against Providence. That's the only time that my 4 years that we were in first place in the Big East. First game of the Big East slate, we beat Providence. Danny hit a buzzer beater. And to this day, the players from Providence said it was a long count. Your guy at the clock didn't start the clock, and the Calangelo had the ball and took the dribble 3 times. I said, hey, you come to Walsh Auditorium, you're not gonna get fair treatment. No.
Okay, we got a comment. I'm sorry, real quick, Paul. We got a comment from Captain Tom Eccles. Then we'll get to Paul's question.
Sure.
How was it playing for Bill Rafferty, and do you still keep in touch?
Playing for Bill. Bill was one of the 5 men in my life who were the most influential. He gave me a shot at playing major Division I ball. Let me get a quality Catholic education. Taught me how to be a man. Take responsibility for your actions. You come on time. You come dressed to impress. And he showed me little things how to get along in life. And Billy would give you the shirt off his back. Matter of fact, one of my teammates, Darryl Devereaux, the Linden legend, passed away about 10, 11 years ago, and Bill paid for the funeral.
Wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
Bill paid for the funeral, and the kind of guy he was. And I'm still in touch with Bill. Like, hey, Coach, 40 years ago, we beat Manhattan, we won your 200th game. Danny, thanks for the memories. Always gets back to me. Coach, happy Father's Day. Thank you for helping me be the man I am today by giving me the opportunity and guiding me to do the right things. So on the floor, Billy would cut us up with a razor with his tongue. And the things he would say, I can't say here because it would make a truck driver blush. But he would have us in stitches, laughing so hard at the things he would say 1 minute, and the next minute he had us close to tears, just cutting us up on missing an assignment or missing a layup or doing something we weren't supposed to do, something stupid. But I was been blessed to have been able to play for Bill Rafferty for those 2 years, and then have Hottie for a year. We loved Hottie. We would have went through the wall for Hottie. He was our surrogate father, and he always told you when you stank the gym out or when you did a good job, and you knew we cared. Hottie wore his heart in his sleeve, and we knew he loved us. Very good developmental coach, very good X and O's coach, and we were as players, we were shocked that what happened.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah, so you were talking about the first days of the Big East. You mentioned Manley Fieldhouse, which I don't think Syracuse ever lost there in their history. You talked about Walsh. That was before the games moved into the professional arenas in a lot of cases, before the Carrier Dome, before Gamble Pavilion. What were the environment like of playing in those small on-campus college gyms?
You're playing in bandbox gyms and like armory type of games. I remember going to Stores, Connecticut, and I swear it was like a surplus World War II Quonset hut. It was old, 3,000 arena, very cozy, very intimidating for incoming players because, like Walsh Auditorium, you'll be on the floor and you'll be on the people in the third row of stands, and it'll actually be 12 feet away from the player on the floor. Yeah. And I remember McDonough Arena in Georgetown, pretty much the same as Walsh Auditorium, but a little bit bigger. It was different, but we were used to it. Going to the Garden for the one game was huge for us. Wow, we get to go to Madison Square Garden. And then junior year, we went to the Meadowlands for a couple games, and then the Garden, playing in the Big East tournaments and the Providence Civic Center the first year, then the Carrier Dome the second year, and Hartwick Civic Center the third year, and then the Garden. That was our big arenas. We would go out to my freshman year. We played Indiana tournament with Bobby Knight and Isaiah Thomas's freshman year, and Alumni Hall there Alumni Arena, I think they call it, was huge.
Mhm.
Playing up at a Brigham Young and the Marriott Center out in Brigham Young, it was huge. We were used to the bandbox at Walsh Auditorium and how nice and cozy it was. And then going to these big places, it was hard for us because of the depth perception and not having the curtain and the stage at one end and and the stands on the other end. But those old gyms had an old feel to it, and you knew they were around since the 40s, 50s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And going to the bigger arenas, we kind of like looking into the future. So we kind of like the first my first 4 years, the crew that we had in the whole conference were kind of like had a foot in the past and a foot in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Art, you're a little bit of a historian. Any questions for Dan?
I'm just wondering about the biggest rivalry. I know, St. John's now is really our natural rival.
Mhm.
But which game did you really get up for on a regular basis?
Had to be Rutgers. If even today, I will not wear Rutgers red. I will not. No, absolutely not. No. And I don't care if the Pirates go 1-25, as long as they beat Rutgers. It was a successful season. We liked playing St. John's at our place because it was always crazy. And St. John's, a lot of kids from New York, they would come over to the Jersey and play. We would go into the city and play. We played pickup in the parks. And we knew each other. Like everybody in each team, we knew each other from their hometown or from playing in summer league or playing back then. Before it was AAU, it was like club ball. But our rivalries was St. John's. And Rutgers was like, no, you cannot lose to Rutgers. That was the Hatfields and McCoys. Then it was St. John's, a little bit St. Peter's, but mostly was St. John's and us.
Dan, we have a question from our. We have a lot of youngsters. I want to say youngsters we have a lot of recent graduates and those still in school.
Mhm.
Nicole has a question for you.
Hi, Dan. So
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for coming on the show tonight. So I'm a recent grad, class of 2023. If you can't tell from my grad cap. And I just recently hit the corporate workforce. So my question for you is, how did playing at Seton Hall University shape your career and personal growth?
Personal growth. I could not have been in a better situation. Seton Hall strengthened my faith, my Catholicism, and having priests as instructors, having being able to go to mass whenever I wanted to, it shaped me into to strengthen my religion. Playing in the Big East and getting a degree from the Big East and playing against the players who I played against and playing for who I played for, that was I don't say a carte blanche, but it helped me get along because people knew Bill Rafferty. People knew the guys I played against in the Big East. Oh, you played against Syracuse. What was it like playing against this guy? Oh, you played against Georgetown. What was it like playing against this guy? So it kind of opened some doors for me. But having a Seton Hall degree and then getting the education that I got and how it brought me from a deathly shy young man. My pants would be on fire, and I wouldn't say boo to anybody. I was so shy. To coming out and actually being able to go and start a conversation and hold a conversation, do some small talk, and be the good person that Seton Hall taught me how to be. I can't exchange that or trade that for anything in the world.
Dan, funny you mentioned that. Before I sign off for the rest of the show, my freshman year was the year they went to the finals. The Phantom call against Michigan, and you're right. When I graduated, 92 and was entering the job market, it was amazing how those 3 years of Seton Hall basketball, making the finals and kind of being on top of our game for a while. Then there was the Harry years and whatnot. It was amazing how everybody knew in the North Jersey or the tri-state area, everybody knew Seton Hall. And, I walk in for an interview, and one of the first questions I would get was, "Oh, how about that basketball team, huh?"
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So that was a great thing. Again, Dan, thanks for joining us. I'm going to sign off, and it's now that Nick from Milburn will be the host now, and we'll see you guys over the weekend.
Thank you, Bobby. Bobby, have fun. Have fun tonight.
Thanks.
Yeah,
thanks.
let's go. Chris Jones, do you have any questions for Dan?
Yeah, so I kind of want to shift a little bit more towards what we're seeing this season with this team now. You were kind of mentioning because you said obviously your matchups against Rutgers was your biggest ones. You also kind of hit a little towards St. John's. So looking at this season, when Seton Hall played St. John's at Prudential Center, I don't know if you saw that game or if you watched it. The environment was something, because obviously having Kadar Richmond go there this season, that's been the whole big thing. Him leaving Seton Hall, going to St. John's. Every time he had the ball in his hands, the crowd booed. So I just want to get your overall thoughts on that matchup, the history between Seton Hall and St. John's, and just again what you saw from that game.
I got a couple things if it's okay, if I could, like, multiple.
Sure. No, go ahead.
The booing part, like, why? And 10, 12, 15 years from now, when they bring back the NIT champion team for reunions, they're going to be cheering them.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know why he left. You know, I'm thinking it's the money situation. If he's doing what he has to do for his family, whatever. God bless him. Do what he did. Thank you for coming to Seton Hall and helping us win the NIT. You know, we would not have been able to do it without him. Again, the booing, it's not Seton Hall. It's not Catholic. It's not how it's supposed to be. You know, let bygones be bygones type of thing. Going to another Big East school, I would have rather seen him go to, you know, an ACC or a Big Ten school. But that's you know, that's just my opinion. As far as how this year is going, I'm seeing a parallel between this year and my senior year, when we were I think you mentioned earlier in the show, we were 6-23, but we had the 35th toughest schedule in the country. You know, 4 teams in the top 20. We played 9 teams that were ranked, you know, in the Big East, and there was no games off, and we were basically a 3-legged horse. It was PJ's first year, and we had, like I said, the bridge before, we had players who were there for Hardy and Billy, and PJ brought his players in, and there had to be a mix, and we had to get used to PJ, and PJ had to get used to us. So it was growing pains. And look what Seton Hall has become since that season. You know, I would say to the Seton Hall faithful and to the team, don't give up. Keep going. Trust the process. Keep working. It's going to get better. You are going to get better. And we can't win them all. You can't win all the time. You know, what do we do? Who wants to be Duke? You know, we're in the best, toughest basketball conference in the country. You know, and it's going to be, someone has to be in the bottom, and it's a cyclical. We're going to get beat. Look at Georgetown. Whoever thought Georgetown, but during from my time, Georgetown was a national powerhouse. And then look what happened to them 4, 5, 6 years ago. And now they're back in the swing of things. Same thing's going to happen with the Pirates. You got to trust the system. You have an excellent coach. You have excellent administration. We have a new facility. Patience. Patience is a virtue, you know, and things will come back. We'll swing around.
Very, very well said. Patience is the key on this. Mr. Russo, questions for Mr. Dunn?
Yeah, first off, Dan, I'll give you the trifecta. Quarter Puerto Rican. My grandmother's from Mayagüez.
All right.
Yeah, there you go.
That's where my mother was born. My mother was born in Mayagüez.
Really?
Yep.
Can you give me the roughly the year? I just want to just try.
My mother was born in 1924.
Okay, my grandmother was 39. All right. Secondly, calling you from Bergen County, North Jersey. And then third, I actually do most of my work. I worked a lot with WSU. I do most of my work calling junior hockey. And so I know the cold because I have called all-star games at SUNY Brockport the last couple of years.
Yeah, I coached at Brockport about 20, 30 years ago. Yep.
Yeah.
What a small world.
Yeah, well, it's a fine school. But certainly, part of the big thing is, you know, touring with all the kids, because that's, you know, it's prospective school anyway. Regarding the current team, I was just wondering. You mentioned, of course, the commonality between the 82-83 squad, this current squad. How much of that, I know NIL is part of it, but, you know, how much of that do you think could be alleviated by maybe easing back on the toughness of the non-conference schedule? Because it seemed like Kevin Willard really leaned into a very difficult conference schedule.
my opinion, I think the non-conference schedule this year was a little bit easier, and I think it was a smart move on the coaching staff's part, because not knowing who you're going to get, who's leaving, who's coming in with the NIL, why would you schedule games against tough teams if you don't know who you have? And why? I'm not going to say like being Georgetown scheduled St. Leo's like they used to, but I wouldn't want to play Michigan State either in the first part of the season. I see easing off a little bit as helping the team grow in confidence. PJ did the same thing with Seton Hall when he took over. He eased off and had easier, I don't want to say easier games, but a little bit less competitive game, less notoriety. I can't think of the right word, but I think you understand what I'm saying. I think when Willard was there, he had, he had guys 2, 3, 4 years, and they had to play to get into the NCAAs, to get the play the tough teams to get into the NCAAs, to get those non-conference bonus points type of thing. I think Shah's doing a good job in easing off the gas pedal, letting these guys grow into being Division I players, being Big East players, and playing at the Prudential Center, playing at such a level, getting used to it. I think he's doing the right thing.
Dan, speaking of Big East non-conference schedules, I mean, your junior year, that's the Big East. And your non-conference schedules, your conference schedule, you had to play St. John's with Walter Berry and Chris Mullins. You had to play Georgetown with Ewing. And then non-conference, you guys scheduled UNLV, right, the Running Rebels, Kentucky, and Houston. I mean, that's about maybe the toughest non-conference schedule we've ever had.
And Notre Dame, too.
And Notre Dame, right.
Notre Dame with John Paxson.
Right.
Yeah. And again, as a player, we didn't know, it was like when we were growing up, if your mom, whatever mom put in front of you, you ate.
Right.
Whoever was, we didn't pick and choose what we wanted to eat. Whoever we had to play, we played. And we played as tough as we can. And Billy and Heidi got us ready. For him. Houston, Heidi outcoached them. Again, if we played them 10 more times, they beat us 11 times. But Heidi had a brilliant strategy, and it worked. Kentucky, there's no way they're cheerleaders, all Americans. So, the bus driver could have came in and scored on us. They were like McDonald's All Americans. Every single one of them were McDonald's All Americans. Notre Dame was in a downswing, but they had Paxson, they had Tim Andre, a couple of guys who played in the NBA, and the Las Vegas had a guy from New York City, Sid Green, and Dwayne Paulie, who played in the NBA. So it helped us get ready for the Big East. But basically, if it was Nevada, Las Vegas, or St. Peter's, whoever was in front of us, we played hard. We played them, and whoever played us was in a street fight. I mean, we never gave up. We knew that we were, but not us against the world, but we knew we can't take a break. We gotta slug and fight and punch and kick and scratch, and it didn't matter who they put in front of us. We just played as hard as we could.
I mean, and not only great programs, but I mean, as you were saying that, I mean, Guy Edwards at Houston, Joby Hall at Kentucky, Digger Phelps. I mean, you guys are going against some of the legends. I'm sorry.
Jerry Tarkanian,
UNLV. I mean, these are legends. These are some of the greatest coaches of all times. That was just an amazing schedule.
And we didn't realize it again until after. We were like, wow. Then you got Raleigh Massimino, John Thompson,
right?
Jim Boeheim,
Louis Conaseca. Yeah.
And again, you go down a list of who's who. It's like now it's like they're all in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, we banged heads with them. We hung with them. Some of them we beat. Some of them we lost to by a little. But we never. My 4 years at Seton Hall, I think we got blown out maybe 3 times. We were always within 12, 15, 17 points. We'd always play a team tough. 20, 25, 30 minutes. It's just we didn't have those 1 or 2 more plays to get us over the hump to get to the end.
Ryan, do you have any questions for Dan?
I'm sorry, you cut out.
Ryan, any questions for Dan?
everything that I'm coming up with is more Rochester related than basketball related. Now that I know he's from Rochester.
Well, you know what? Whatever you have Rochester related, Bobby has my number. Give me a call and we could talk Rochester. But we're not gonna talk about the garbage plate though.
and sure enough, that was exactly what my question was going to be.
You've got to have a bottle of Pepto-Bismol if you have that. Those of you guys know, the garbage plate was like Rochester's version of White Castle.
I don't know what White Castle is.
What?
What?
No, you're.
You don't know what
kidding,
White
right?
Castle is? What rock are you living under?
Thank you.
You heard of Harold and Kumar?
You got to go down to Newark and get a bag of belly bombers.
How is
I
this
don't
the
know.
new story of the show?
I don't know who Kumar is. Now all of a sudden I'm confused.
There's one right down the street on South Orange Avenue on the left-hand side. And what are they called? Rat burgers or
Yeah,
something?
Matt Burgers, Murder Burgers, belly bombers. I wouldn't open up a can of worms here.
They do soak up alcohol very well though at 3 o'clock in the morning.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Mr. Morgan, after your 21st birthday, did you go to have a couple of White Castle burgers?
No, not White Castle burgers. Grilled cheese, yes, not White Castle burgers.
Do you have a question for Dan?
Yeah, so I work in professional baseball. I interview players pre and post game, so do a lot of social media, like fun questions. So I have more of like a theoretical, like fun question than a serious one. But since you left Seton Hall, can you name like a starting five with you included that you would like to work with the players that came after you? Whether it's someone on today's team or any time from the present to when you left, who would you like to lace up with on the court to run it back?
So my post '83 Pirate Dream team.
Yes, correct. Yep.
Whitehead, Karnisovas, Bryant, Halsell, I think his name was, the 6'7" shooter. I think his name was Halsell. He was injured. I think one of the PJ's last years. He was a really good shooter from the outside. I liked him. Oh my goodness. I would like to have Danny Calandro as running the point, but he said post '83. Oh, I have four. As soon as I get it, I'll remember. But
Terry DeHare? Terry DeHare?
Thank you. I knew there was somebody. He's Terry DeHare. It was my teammate Tommy Brown's number, 24. So I always tell Tommy Brown, "Hey Tommy, they retired your number."
Anybody else have any questions for Dan?
Well, I have a couple if we could squeeze them in.
Yeah, jump in.
And Dan, thanks so much for spending the time with us tonight.
It's a pleasure. I appreciate you guys taking the time. I'm hoping I'm answering all your questions satisfactorily.
Oh, this is
You're
great.
Great.
Thank you.
So two questions. The first is, I know that not only were you a powerful big man when you played, but you coach big men and you've have a whole organization designed to improving big men. Can you talk a little bit about Seton Hall's big men this year? And I can never pronounce their names, but Emmanuel Okorafor and Godswill Erahine and Gus Yeldon. We haven't got a ton of production from them this year. What do you see in the way they play and how they would develop?
All right. First of all, let me say Godswill played at Mild High School, Long Island Lutheran. So he's going to be a hell of a good ball player. He comes from an excellent program, so he's going to be good. Coachability is a big thing. Learning the basics about big man play, and I think they obviously have the tools, and they can play in the Big East. It's just the physicality, and not forget about shooting the threes. Forget about your mid-range game. You have to be in the paint, banging. You had to get those inside buckets, the big little lefty jump hook, drop step, up and unders, using the backboard. Simple little things that'll make them add 6 or 8 points a game. That was 6 or 8 points to the team. That'll help them take pressure off the guards, rebounding, better interior defense, not being afraid to bang. If you're gonna if you got to get a foul, take a foul. If a guy's gonna go for an easy layup, let him feel some of the wood, make him feel like you can't come in here and do this in my house. A little of the old biggies, not here. If your guards stay outside, shoot a jumper. Don't come in my house because you're gonna feel some pain.
Well, at 6 to 8 points a game would have been 6 wins this season. If you look at some of the games that we lost this year.
It's true. And if Shaheen needs, someone to come down and help work out, more than happy to come down and help out the fellow Pirate big men. Show him a little bit of Big East snarl, how he used to do it in the old days.
Oh, then my last question would be, I know you've been involved in scouting. Mm-hmm. You're an international player. You coached in the women's team in Puerto Rico. A lot of discussion in our in the Seton Hall community about NIL and about basically not having enough of it. What do you see as a way to get an advantage in terms of finding players if you're not going to be able to, if you don't have as Nick from Milburn says, the vitamin water guy to dump a couple of $1 million into your coffers every year? How do you stay at a Big East level? What would be your thoughts on that?
It's not an easy question because
I know
it's not an easy question because we don't have the checkbook to open and give somebody $3 or $4 million to play. We were happy to have a scholarship and have our laundry done, our linens done. We were happy with that. But there's got to be ways to raise money for them. And the NCAA or Congress or somebody has to come and put a lid or a hard salary cap or something because it's getting out of hand. When you have basketball players making more money than college presidents, making more money than the coaches, and then you have schools are now charging students fees to pay for the NILs. So if I was John Q's student who had to do work study and apply for all these grants and stuff, and I had to pay $1,200, $1,500 more fee to go into the NIL for basketball or football or whatever, I'd be kind of upset. So that there has to be some kind of balance or some kind of logic to come to this. Now, to answer the question about how do we compete as a smaller NIL, we got to be creative. We have to find players who are hungry. We have to find a 6'7", 6'8" post player who's a beast. We got to find a 5'10" super quick guard who can shoot the lights out and cover a 6'4" guard. There are, I'm not saying we have to be like Lana Mr. Toys, but there are players out there who will come to Seton Hall for the education, for the exposure, to play in the Big East, who are not, who won't embarrass the school playing wise, and then have a we instead of me mentality. If you're coming into Seton Hall, it's we, it's us, it's not me. I'm making this. I got to do this. No, that doesn't work. There's no I in team. So there is like a Rubik's Cube type of thing. There is a hard way to fit it, but there will be a fit. Seton Hall is too good of a school, too good of a venue, too good of a situation for players not to want to come, regardless of if it's 1 year, 2 years, for the money to be seen to play the best level of basketball in the country, to be seen nationwide, and to get great coaching. The rest will follow. If you have the framework done, which we do, and you have the fan support, you have the school support, you have a great coaching staff, you have good facilities, you have an excellent school. You have fans who are rabid, but we don't have that guy's going to write a $10 million check. Mm-hmm. Well, if we got to bring back nickel cans, to get something together, let's do it. If we have a bake sale or whatever, we do it. But going in, these players need to know you're not going to be making $4 or $5 million. We're going to our cap or whatever is X amount, and they got to realize we're going to help you get ready to move on to bigger and better things. And that goes to the young lady's question: how does Seton Hall help me? It helped me go on to bigger and better things. So it's same thing 40 years later, same church but a different pew. Put it that way. Well,
thank you very much, Dan.
Guys, this has been a great mix of questions. I'm loving it. Anybody else with any questions out there?
Yeah, so I actually got one because you were talking about, I want to go a little bit back to the whole big man You were a big man. You talk about your praise of Godswill, what he can do, only being a freshman. Seton Hall in these past few years has had that big man, whether it's Tyree Samuel, Jaden Bediaku, Ike Obiagu. He was my favorite player since I've been here my time. You praise Godswill. What do you see from Godswill, Erie Arena, and what do you think in his next 2 or 3 years? What can he really give to this team?
He's got the skills, the tools. He has to get the confidence. So he has that toolbox with all the tools in it. He has to learn how to use those tools. How do I use the Allen wrench? How do I use the hacksaw? I already can use the hammer and saw. How am I going to use the Phillips head screwdriver? He's going to have to learn that. And then once he learns that and gets better and gets more confidence in it, he's going to be a good ball player. He comes from Long Island Lutheran, a solid program, nationally respected program. He's come to a school where he's going to be able to grow and get better. So he has to have faith in himself, and the coaching staff has to have confidence to invest in him and put the time in and help him develop and grow as a player. And he will be. He's a sleeper like I was. It's going to take him a year or two, but if he stays the course and does the work, puts in the time, and the coaching staff puts in the time, helps him grow and get better, by junior and senior year, he's going to be tough to handle.
Dan, speaking of Long Island Lutheran, didn't John Garcia go there also?
John Garcia, yes, another big one. Yes, I couldn't remember. I know there was another big man from Long Island who went there between me and Godswill, and I couldn't remember his name. Thank you very much for that. Yes, John did go to Long Island Lutheran, and I love how you said Long Island Lutheran.
No pressure. But who was the best out of the three at Long Island Lutheran?
Oh, it's a personal bias, but if they played in my era, if they played in my era, it would be me. If I played in their era, it would be them. Godswill wouldn't be able to handle me inside because every move I had 1 or 2 counter moves to it. I wouldn't be able to handle his athleticism. And John Garcia, his athletic speed up running up and down the floor, I would have to grab him like, hold up, wait a second. We're trying to, But different areas, different skills. I would be able to hold my own with them for 45 seconds, a minute and a half. But I'm 63 years old, so I would give them the best. I would give them a lesson on how to play, but they would out athletize me, if that makes sense.
Sure. Anybody else with any questions for Dan? Dan, let me ask you one. So we have talked on here, and a lot of schools have followed suit with this. I know Villanova, I know Duke. What do you think about these schools hiring a GM to handle all the other stuff, and Seton Hall, creating that position? And if we do create that position, are you available?
If Seton Hall needs me to mop the floors and change the light bulbs at Walsh Auditorium, I'm there. I'm there. Let me give me a room in Old Bowling Hall, and I'm good. The GM position, when I was there, we had Bill Hardy and Mel Knight. 3 coaches. That was it. Then the coaching staff kind of expanded. Director of player operations, all those other things that they have to do. General manager, that's getting into like a grayish area. But if it needs to be done, to take some things off the coaching staff's plate so they can concentrate on recruiting and X's and O's and developing players, then they have to do it. Whatever needs to get done has to get done. And I personally, from my era, I don't see the need for 7, 8, 9 people on staff. But my era, we played on UHF television. Those of you who don't know what UHF is, you got to Google it. When we had antennas on the TVs. But things change. Things change. They grow. They progress. They evolve. And if Seton Hall ever needed me, they got my number. You guys have, get a hold of me. I'll be more than willing to help out. Just to lend my 2 cents. Some of it, I tell my players, your life is a puzzle. You got to take pieces of the puzzle from every coach you're going to. Some of the pieces just don't fit, but you're going to be taking something from me to add to your puzzle to make you a better player, to make you a better person. And as long as I can give you something to walk away with that you remember and then helps you grow and get better, I've done my job. I'm giving back to the game that's been so good to me.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for coming on. We'd love to have you on again. This was great, and we really appreciate it. And thank you so much. And go Pirates!
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I hope I've answered your questions the way you hoped I'd answer it, or to answer your questions to the way that you hoped I answered it. So, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. Go Pirates! Go Big Blue!
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you,
so
Dan.
much. Take care, folks.
Take care. Okay, guys, let's just go around, and if anyone has anything to talk about with Seton Hall basketball, have at it. Paul, go first.
Well, we have the Huskies coming up on Saturday. We talked a little bit before about how formidable a team they are, and we were talking a little bit about UConn getting once again wooed as they were last year by, I think it was the Big 12, or the one with Kansas in it. I can't keep track.
That's it.
And now
Big
that the Big Ten's got 16 teams, so I don't know what the numbers mean anymore. But and the question of what would their leaving mean to the conference? Would it be a good thing or a bad thing? And for the conference and for Seton Hall. And so we'd kind of been kicking that idea around. So I know that Nick from Milburn has some pretty strong ideas on the topic. So why don't you go ahead and give us yours first?
I don't know. Going back to Chris Russo's years here, we were the top 2 in the conference, basically with Villanova, and then Marquette might have been third. And it was fine. Villanova won, 2 national championships. And I don't think we needed UConn. I don't think the conference did. And I know Seton Hall didn't. And it was great for, it brought prominence back to UConn. But all it did for us was take away 2 non-conference games. And I get it. Playing 11, what do we play now? The 10 conference games when we used to play 9. I don't know. I'm just not a fan. If they leave, good riddance. Mr. Jones?
Yes, I'm torn because I do think that UConn being in this conference, obviously as a Seton Hall fan, you're going to say no. Like you're not going to want them in this conference because of how good they are and what they've done in this conference, especially in these past few years, being the back-to-back national champion. But it's still a conference. Like you look at this year, they're not up to the same standard as always, or they're not playing as good as they have been. Again, they're having a good season. Like we would love to be what they are, like 17-7. We would love to have a record like that. But I don't know. I don't think there's enough for me to say they shouldn't be here, because again, you can put them anywhere else, and in my eyes, they're still going to be just as good. So I think when people say you don't want them in, again, that's going to be a Big East fan wanting a big competitor out of the conference. So I think it could go either way, but it's a topic that is definitely up in the air.
Chris Russo, your thoughts?
I think Nicole was going to say something first.
I'm sorry. Go, Nicole.
Yeah, I'm actually on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to this. I actually think that UConn makes the Big East more popular and more interesting to watch, especially because if UConn never came back to the Big East, we would never have had January 2023 at home. When I was in the student section and we beat them on the buzzer beater, for me as a fan, that was one of the greatest moments in my history at Seton Hall, being a student in the student section. If UConn wasn't there, that would have never happened, and I don't even know what I would have said for that. But like even just watching them in the national championship, it kind of helped the Big East numbers as a whole. And I mean, yeah, we're kind of seeing the effects of that now with NIL and stuff, but I think that having these powerhouse schools, it brings more attention to the conference, and ultimately it's going to bring in more revenue. So that's my 2 cents on that.
But are they better for Seton Hall being in the Big East? I mean, we were right up there, and Villanova won 2 national championships in the Big East, and they weren't doing great. They were floundering, whatever that league was they were in, and they left us. I mean, are they better? Is it better for Seton Hall with them being in or being out?
You're going to have to come back to me on that one.
Mr. Russo.
Yeah, well, first off, it was, and I can tell you because my mom went to Memphis, I can tell you it is the American Athletic Conference.
Okay.
And to be fair, a lot of people forget that UConn actually won a national championship while they were in that conference.
Right,
It was under Ken Ollie. You know, there is no one right answer to this.
Right.
Look, if some people are going to argue that there is a bigger villain now with, you know, Danny Hurley with UConn, whereas Jay Wright and Villanova was that villain, maybe to a larger extent. Seton Hall could actually really compete with Villanova. You could argue, again, there's that intimidation factor from Jay Wright. Put a little asterisk on that. You could argue Seton Hall at times was better than Villanova. But, you know, it's funny looking at those. And with UConn, the Big East has more national recognition. Without UConn, you think, especially with the way Seton Hall has had to deal with the NIL, maybe if UConn leaves, Seton Hall is going to get more attention from the Big East and think, oh, this is one of our blue blood programs. We need to support them. And maybe that's where Val Ackerman is thinking. I will say on the flip side, though, I only had 1 year where I got to see UConn in the Big East, at least while I was at Seton Hall. First 3, or actually technically, no, none of the years I was there were they actually in the Big East. The only time I was going to say the last year I got to see, because again, this is not just men's basketball. This, you know, women's basketball is a huge factor as well. And you have UConn women's basketball as the most successful program in the history of that aspect of the sport, maybe any collegiate basketball program. But it's funny, I go back to kind of a long story, but Gino Auriemma, I remember we called the game. Seton Hall played UConn women's basketball my senior year, and pretty much underneath the bleachers and in the press room, the de facto press room, whatever, the film room, Gino Auriemma told us a story about how the first time he was in that gym in Walsh in 1980 something, he was scouting a game, and I forget who the 2 teams were. I forget if it was like Newark something and East Orange something, and there was a huge brawl, and one of the brawl was in large part led by a high school girl named Dana Owens. Dana Owens, you may now know, as Gino Auriemma said, Ryan's nodding his head, as Queen Latifah. And so, yeah. And so it is funny. You do have an aura of people like that, like Gino Auriemma, and storytellers like that. And you think, you have that connection, and you think, again, this is not just men's basketball. This is a lineage of people throughout college sports. And on that side, you could say it's a positive because UConn is such a historic member of the Big East because they were successful. They have been at their most successful when they're in the Big East. And so it's really, it's loaded. It could really go either way, but there are definitely benefits to either side.
Ryan, your thoughts?
I don't really particularly think that I could have really phrased any of that any better. And I will say he knows more about that than I do, so I also don't have a ton to comment on there. But I do agree with the mentality about, if there's a less, if there's sort of less to choose from, for lack of a better way of putting it, if there's a smaller pool, and kind of maybe having to bring more attention to Seton Hall as a consequence of some of that, and talking about that when you talked about the history a little bit more, I do think that sometimes when you bring in a school to a different conference, I know that sometimes, like in football, we saw this with the USC, we saw this with a couple of the other schools that have switched conferences, where sometimes the conferences can get more attention as a whole, or sometimes all that attention gets usurped by that one school, and it's even less attention to the other schools. So I can honestly see both sides here.
Mr. Morgan.
Yeah, I want to echo a lot of what Nicole said. I think UConn bringing like the spectacle to the Big East is really important. And then I know, Nick, you challenge that with well, is that better for NIL? And obviously I think we get less NIL money there. But at the same time, I'm a competitor. I played sports growing up. I don't
Right.
want like the easy gimme, like okay, we're the second best team in the conference, so we're gonna go because UConn's not there anymore. If we're behind Marquette or behind Creighton, like I don't want to be the second best. And like if UConn was in the conference, we wouldn't have made it. Like I don't want it to be an easier path for us because I think that's lowering the standards and the expectations for the school. Really, I want to see a talented and a competitive conference. This way we can say we earned it and we played UConn and we beat them 1 or 2 games. We beat them at home at the buzzer, or whatever the case may be. I think 3 years in a row at least we beat UConn at home. So to really earn those wins, to earn your spot in March Madness, to earn your spot wherever the case may be, I think that's a lot more important than saying, well, UConn's a good team, let's get rid of them to make ourselves look better. I want to earn it. I want to be there. I want to prove to the country, because at the end of the day, March Madness is a national scale. I want to prove to the country that we are a top team, not just the Big East Conference, that we can beat everyone who's not named UConn.
I mean, that's a great point. But what I'm going to say is UConn left the Big East. Big East didn't leave UConn. So, I mean, and at one point, I mean, I don't know, and I think Paul knows this, the Bobby Gonzalez years, those teams were not as bad as everyone says they were. Herb Pope, Jeff Robinson, I mean, Jeremy Hazel. There was a lot of talent on that team. Problem was, that was like when the Big East was insane. They had Louisville and some other schools. And it was just, we would be right on the bubble every year and wouldn't make the tournament. And, then Willard took over and the Big East changed. And, we were in the tournament every year. And I'm going to say that the talent on those Gonzalez teams were close to the talent on the Willard teams. It's just that the Big East was just an insane conference. Yes. And you want to play great competition. Nothing wrong with that. But it has to be a little bit level too. Paul, do you remember those Bobby teams? And
I do.
What do you think about that?
So I think that your point's well taken, that in a conference that's loaded, it becomes more and more difficult.
Yeah.
You need your conference to get 8 teams out of 10 in before you get a bid. And that is tough. And we're going to see that in the Southeastern Conference this year, right? Where right now they're talking about 13 out of 16 teams. No, they're not going to get that many teams. They simply can't. Right? Somebody's going to end up with 11 losses and not make it. For me, UConn, to me, was always a Big East team. I know they left, but they were one of the original 7, along with Seton Hall. And, they didn't wander in like Louisville and then wander out. They were from the very beginning. So that's one of the reasons that I like them, the tradition. The other one is that I think that, we're one of the few. We may be the only basketball conference that competes nationally. And and you're seeing the rest of those conferences growing more and more. 16 teams in the Big Ten. I think the ACC has 16 teams, and they're continuing to grow. So I'm concerned that the Big East needs to have at least 2 marquee programs, 2 nationally programs that have national attention to them. Right now, UConn is one of them. I think St. John's will be one of them as long as Don Rick Pitino is there. And then you have, Shaka Smart at Marquette, and you have Cooley at Georgetown, and you have, the Creighton program, so that you've got a very solid top to bottom conference, even though it's only got 11 teams in it. And I think that's important for Seton Hall to continue to be viewed as a major team. Now, to Nick's point, I don't want UConn around if every year I got to read in the paper that they're considering leaving.
Right.
So, I mean, and I really find it, I got to say it, find it stupid. I grew up in Connecticut. Okay. If you go into a bar in Connecticut and the women's team is up by 35 points and you ask to change the channel, they won't change it. That's how big UConn's women's basketball is in Connecticut. You say, I want to watch the Ranger game. It's starting. No, we're going to watch the end of the UConn women beating, Marquette by 28. Okay. But I don't know anybody in Connecticut who's ever woke up in the morning and said, I can't wait for UConn football season to start. So they're really chasing a dream. They don't have the support of the state the way they do for men's and women's basketball. They built this stadium that's stuck in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of Rensselaer Field. It's in a giant vacant lot with nothing around it. And they foolishly believe that they can go and compete nationally in football every time they go 7-5. And from the point of view of the Big East, it would be nice for them to give up the football dream, go go FCS, commit to the Big East, and be one of the 2 or 3 marquee programs. That's what I'd like to see. But Nick, you're right. If every year I got to read about them joining the ACC or the Big 12, go do it and get out of our hair once and for all.
Exactly. So we're approaching an hour and a half, which is a record. It's also great. Our executive producer is here, Nicole Gizzi. Let's go final thoughts. Nicole, what do you think? Anything about Seton Hall basketball world?
Final thoughts. Well, I don't have too much hope for Saturday, but I hope for a big upset. But we can only hope. And then for women's game, obviously, we want them to succeed just as much as the men. I do really hope to see them make a good March Madness run. It would be great for their program and to put Seton Hall women's basketball back on the map. That's all
Thank you. Mr. Morgan.
Yeah, I mean, the women's game yesterday, there was a lot of excitement. There was a lot of energy. The pep band, I know, was very into it. We were getting in the ears of the refs. We were chirping because there were some calls that a lot of the band members didn't quite agree with, especially in the fourth quarter when all the N1s was really detrimental to the final score. But the energy is definitely there. The women are definitely keeping things exciting when it comes to the basketball programs. And the UConn game next week, we're all very excited for. We do think that there is hope for the women. Bouncing back province on Sunday is going to be a fun one. Hopefully with Catalan, we can have a nice game, a nice showing if Catalan's around next week. But, 2 big games against UConn. I also do want to say, Marquette is 1 game back of us for the women in conference play and overall record-wise. So if that's something we want to eye going into Big East Conference and, potentially March Madness bids, we both have to play UConn 1 more time to finish out the series, which I think is important. We have UConn at home. They have UConn on the road, so that's going to be a tough one for them. I think that's where we have the advantage. Obviously, we want to win out and ideally put up a good, game against UConn. An upset would be obviously amazing. But if we can win out and then keep a close margin in UConn or against UConn, then Marquette being at UConn hopefully will help us just a little bit more when it comes down to that final stretch. So lots of positivity, lots of optimism for the women, and we're excited to see how the season ends up.
Thank you. Ryan.
Guys, I appreciate y'all having me on tonight. It was great to be on for the first time, especially with the special guests that we had. Like I said before, it's been offensively has we all have seen what has and rather hasn't happened recently, and I think that's going to be huge on Saturday, and then going into a big game against Marquette. I know a lot of us don't have a lot of hopes for that on Tuesday, but my hope is maybe sometimes they've had a couple of times where their defense has been able to be a little bit vulnerable, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity to capitalize on that and really surprise somebody because it's getting harder and harder to be optimistic, but I'm trying.
Thank you. Chris Russo.
Yeah, I would say for the men's program, look, it's the only way you're going to make the NCAA tournament is if you win the Big East tournament, obviously. So you're going to have to work hard enough for that 2021 Georgetown-like miracle. But you want to just at least be competitive with UConn. Just at least take them to halftime in a competitive game. It's the least you can ask for, even with the struggles they have had that UConn has had this year anyway. Even then, I think getting to halftime with a competitive game would be something that the fans would appreciate just to see that effort. Regarding the women's, and look, I would say for the future of the program, look, the transfer portal, the scouting, and possible NIL changes, a potential GM, and the scout and Shaheen Holloway, that's all. I think the basis of the sun will come out tomorrow. They are your daddy Warbucks. So I think that's the whole situation there for the women's squad. I expect this team to make the NCAA tournament. I think it's their bid to lose, and I would not be surprised if they make a run to semifinal, maybe the final of the Big East tournament, and I would not be surprised whatsoever if they could take a game in the NCAA tournament. And I could say, from a personal standpoint, again, I'm not a homer for anybody, but I will say Coach Bozzella and that whole squad treated us Chris, Nick, you guys would know pretty well. I think now that the men's program treated us well. I think the women's program treated us incredibly well at WSOU. And so Coach Bozzella was just tip of the iceberg in addition to Matt Sweeney and the whole coaching staff. So it would be incredible on their part, I think, for their sake, to see them make the NCAA tournament, and truly something that would bring a lot of pride to the school.
Thank you. Chris Jones.
Yeah, so I'm going to stick a little bit more towards the women's side, but bouncing off of what Nick Morgan said, it was a fun game. It was an interesting game. Watching the band get involved was quite the experience. I was there working the TV broadcast, and I think maybe every 2 minutes I heard a voice coming from my right ear. So that was made my day there. But this women's team is special. It is absolutely special. And Nick from Milburn, as you always say it, have faith in faith. She will show up when you need her, and she'll do what she needs to do if she wants to win a game. Obviously, she didn't have her best outing in this past game, but when you need faith, she'll be there. And again, looking at the rest of this team, when they're at full health, you can't stop them. And as Chris Russo said, they are NCAA tournament bound. This is a team that has the talent to do it and can do it. And as he said, it's their bid to lose. Looking at what they have for down the rest of the stretch, they got Providence on Sunday. That's going to be a bounce back game. They're going to look to put some points on the board. Fade's going to look to get back on track. And then Wednesday, that's going to be a big one. I believe it's UConn on Wednesday. I could be wrong on that, but I believe it's UConn on Wednesday. So yeah, Chris confirmed there. So that game could really determine how the rest of this season goes. But this women team has potential, has a lot of potential, especially after the regular season.
Thank you. And Paul from Finland, thoughts?
There you go.
Iceland, I'm sorry.
Iceland. So my big hope for the game on Saturday is that we see a big showing from the Seton Hall fans. I know that they're promoting it as New Jersey night because UConn travels well. And I'd hate to have that building with 10 minutes left sound like Gamble Pavilion. So I'm hoping that the fans show out. They stay there regardless of what the final score is. They get on Danny's case a little bit. They get on the refs a little bit, and they make it a hard place for UConn to play. And then who knows? Maybe Danny Hurley gets 3 technical fouls. Isaiah Coleman hits 6 foul shots in a row, and we win on a 3 at the buzzer. We can always hope.
Thank you. And let me just say, I think Saturday, get there early, get your shirt. I don't know how many they're giving away, but if you want, I think it's a Taylor ham and cheese shirt, and then there's a Taylor ham and cheese eating contest or something like that, which sounds like fun. I'm not going to be able to go. I'm sorry, what?
Pork roll next.
Pork, well, yeah.
Not Taylor
Okay,
ham.
you're from South Jersey. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
it's
you're from
Taylor
South
ham.
Jersey.
Taylor ham all the
Taylor
way.
ham. Thank you, Nicole.
I don't care.
Brian doesn't care. And anyway, and next Wednesday I have my seats. I hope to see everyone there for Paige Becker's last dance at Walsh. Let's ruin the last dance for Paige if possible. It would be probably the biggest upset in Seton Hall women's basketball's history, but who knows? You have to play the game. Great show tonight. Thank you, Dan Dunn, my classmate, for coming on. You were awesome. So for Paul from Iceland, not Finland, Chris Russo of WSOU fame, Chris Jones of current WSOU fame, Ryan, Nick Morgan, #1 player in the band and #1 most knowledge on Seton Hall's women's team, and our executive producer, the one and only, often imitated, never duplicated, Nicole Gizzy. Nicole, a pleasure having you on. You did an amazing job. Thank you for doing all the work behind the scenes and now in front of the camera. This is great. Thank you so much. Everyone in Pirate Nation, good luck, good night, and God bless. Thank you. We're out.
Go Pirates.
Go Pirates.
Everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.